Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel discussion is on skills for a digital age. I'll be leading with a keynote address by Mark Garnier, MT, Prime Minister's envoy to Brunei, Myanmar, and Thailand. So we hand over now to our moderator for this session, Dr. Samir Katiwada, Technology and Innovation Specialist, Social Sectors with the Asian Development Bank, to introduce our speakers and lead us through our sessions. Dr. Samir, welcome.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, first of all, many thanks to everybody who's joining our panel discussion today. So today we'll be talking about skills development, so future of skills, and it's very nice that we are going right after the panel that just concluded on future of work. So I think it builds on that in many ways. So we have a really amazing lineup of speakers today with us. Let me provide a brief introduction, but I know you will hear more from the speakers themselves. So we've got three speakers with us today. First, Dato Palani. Dato is he is the chairman of the ASEAN Future Workforce Council, a body led by business and industry that advances ASEAN-wide action on future skills and TVET development, and serves as a member of the newly formed ASEAN TVET Council. So Dato, rest assured, I'll be asking you a lot of questions about the role of TVET sector, given the rapidly changing demand for labor in our region. The second speaker we have is Janine Teo. Janine has been doing some really interesting and exciting work using education technologies. He is the CEO of Solve Education. Really looking forward to talking to you, Janine, today. And the last speaker we have today is Suzanne Coogan. She's the Vice President of Shell. Suzanne will bring us will provide us the industry perspective on the future of skills development, the role of employer-provided training, and all the issues around how do we engage with private sector more as we look to reskill and upskill our workforce. With that, let me start. Let me start by inviting Mark, who will be giving us keynote. Sorry, I actually got a bit confused now because I was just introducing the panel, but I wasn't aware that I was supposed to introduce Mark as well.
Well, Dr. Samir, thank you very much indeed. It's always rather difficult at this time of day to get the running order quite right. But thank you very much for that introduction. The Honourable Minister for Education, Brunei Darussalam, the Honourable YB Yanti Raymond, Chair of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, Haslina Taibi, Chair of the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit, and Farido Dato Talib, Managing Director and CEO of Brunei Darussalam. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, this pandemic has focused minds on boosting skills for the digital age. And so I'd therefore like to thank ASEAN BAC for making today's important discussion happen. If today's telecast is anything to go by, your ASEAN Business and Investment Summit next month will be an absolute triumph. So it's a privilege to join you following the UK becoming ASEAN's newest and first dialogue partner for 25 years. As the Prime Minister's trade envoy to Brunei Darussalam, I'm immensely grateful to Brunei for their support as chair in achieving this milestone. That said, of course, I should point out that we are not exactly the new kid on the block here. We've been a friend and partner of ASEAN since its creation over 50 years ago, and our links with the region are centuries old. Dialogue partner status is the foundation of an enhanced relationship between the UK and ASEAN, its communities and its member states. It provides a platform for boosting our two-way trade, standing at almost £34 billion annually. It means closer collaboration on clean growth, a particular focus of Brunei as ASEAN chair, and the UK as president of COP26. But it also means deeper digital ties, including ASEAN's ecosystem through the recently launched ASEAN UK Digital Innovation Partnership. Taking our people-to-people links to the next level is another shared priority. It is clear that ASEAN values a UK education. Before the pandemic, there were over 40,000 ASEAN students studying in the UK, and a further 125,000 were reading for a UK degree remotely. A UK education opens doors and opportunity wherever you are in the world. And the UK is home to a quarter of the world's top 20 universities, and a quarter of the world's leaders studied here in the UK. So in the spirit of deepening our people-to-people links even further, I'm delighted to announce UK support for HIRED, ASEAN-backed 2021 legacy project. HIRED will help ASEAN achieve UN Sustainable Development Goals, ensuring employers meet the skills gaps and offer resilient employment in this digital age. A strong workforce is key to a stronger, greener recovery from COVID-19. The UK will support HIRED by developing a pilot apprenticeship scheme, providing seed funding and technical and vocational skills expertise. The pilot will focus on data analysts. That's because across ASEAN, data analysts are both in high demand and in short supply. The pilot will also focus on Brunei as this year's ASEAN chair. Once the pilot has been completed, ASEAN BAC expects to expand HIRED across ASEAN. So working across the UK and Bruneian businesses and technical training communities, we will explore how best to shrink the skills gap surrounding data analysis, and in doing so, we will establish new alliances for skills training. We will also harness digital technology to include hard-to-reach students. I believe this is a vital piece of work. It is crucial that we ensure a supply of top talent to meet demand. Our support is about preparing ASEAN's workforce to unleash the region's full potential as a crucible of innovation, an economic powerhouse set to be the fourth largest economy by 2030. To coin a phrase, it's about caring, preparing, and prospering. So my thanks to today's distinguished panelists. I look forward to a lively exchange of views on skills for the digital age. Dr. Samir, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was very good and setting the stage. My apologies for missing to introduce you. You have such an amazing background. I was just looking at what to say about Mark, but I think Mark's opening remarks summed up, I think, his views on what we'll be discussing today in terms of looking at skills development, the role that the region plays, and the relationship between the UK and ASEAN. There's a lot to talk about. Let me start actually by inviting our panelists. Mark, if you don't mind, I'm going to start inviting our panelists just to give a quick opening remarks, and then we'll get into a Q&A. First, we'll start with Dato. Dato, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Samir. Right. I think I was told that got about 45 minutes. I'm going to give you an overview. Because the subject is something that's very close to our heart. I think ASEAN Future Workforce Council has been working on this subject together with our business representative from the member states related to TVET matter. Right. I think as we are aware, the ASEAN region has experienced some of the highest growth rates in the world, with investment in skills playing a significant role in helping national economies to adjust to the changes in working practice, advances in technology, and challenges associated with globalization. In certain ASEAN member states, I think this process has been successfully managed with some good significant advances, while the other member states are in the progress of embarking due to the dynamism of the region, where the economic perspective and the education and the structure very much differs, right? So each member states are moving in their own phase with a different level of progress that could be monitored, right? I think, but nevertheless, I think one of the key things that we need to acknowledge is that the last World Economic Forum indicated that about 42% of the core skill will change by 2022, and probably by 2030, about 1 billion of the total world workforce may need to reskill and to look at the skill set that they've actually acquired in order for them to move forward. With these challenges, the dynamic of these challenges, I think I wish to go straight to the core challenge that probably is one that cut across in the region. Based on our work, we can see very significantly the issue of skills mismatch. All right, I think this is one of the pertinent issue, and those of us in the fraternity knows that this is the core issue that probably, if it's well addressed, we could see a good significant progress. I think the skill development of labor force requires an enabling environment so that the provision of skill is balanced with the provision of opportunities to use these skills. Right? Therefore, skill development should be integrated with employment promotion for both the formal and informal private sector. In particular, international cooperation in developing an enabling environment for micro and small enterprise is of critical importance. It's essential to examine the interaction between country approaches to skill development and country looks at skill utilization. All right. So past experience suggests that training alone will, in most cases, result in a very disappointing employment outcomes. All right. So, of the central lesson that we could learn is that there is a necessity for the country policymakers to look into industrial policies that target growth in sectors that have employment potential. Right. So once industry policy is set, it's easier for the stakeholders to match the balance between the demand and the supply of skills. Right. Probably, unfortunately, the bigger challenge in this region is that it is very much supply driven rather than demand driven. All right. So we always face the circumstances that the skill acquired eventually is not being utilized, less utilized, because there's no direct link to that scenario. But there's a need to raise the scale of training, because I think the bigger challenge is also the quality part of it, consistently also the scale in terms of the quantity, the level, because we are also having a situation of not only the high skill but mid skill level, and those who are in the informal sector which has acquired the skill but they are not recognized in the formal perspective as a skilled employee, right? So I think and also the provision of certification, and this is a big challenge within the region as well, because there's a big labor mobilization within the region, and then the acceptance of a common standard that could be utilized to recognize the acquisition of the skill and knowledge that can cut across the region could be one of the area that is very pertinent to look at. Right. I think, I mean, looking at this dynamic, but what I'm saying is that there's a great opportunity, because I think skill is, relook at the skill enhancement is the way forward. And as we embark the fourth industrial revolution, I think the evaluation of the digital technology now with the impact of the pandemic, what that we used to say is going to come in 5 years, 10 years, is probably has arrived, and most of the people are actually in the midst of it, strategizing or looking in how to manage it, as well as to go along and live with that changes. Right? We have identified, we have the ASEAN Workforce Council. Some of my colleagues are also here as a audience of this session. I saw some of them just now. Right? We have come out with a 45 recommendation upon a very detailed study looking at the dynamic of the region. Some of the areas that we identified as key game changers are factors that need to be looked at in order for us to enhance the skill adaptability and the movement. One of it is to enhance the relevance and the quality of TVET regulation and strategies. This is something that is very critical to look at, and probably this could be better managed with the effective involvement of the private sector at the policy and the regulation stage, in order to ensure that we don't design the policy and subsequently we go back to the operation side and come back. So we have also actually suggested the formation of National TVET Council at each ASEAN member states, comprising of policymakers and the industry to work as a partner, rather than one policy side being set up, the other side is responding towards it when the damage is done, or probably asking things to happen. Right? So that is one. Another thing is also to establish public-private model for skill standard development and assessment. I think within the region, big organizations like probably maybe Suzanne will be sharing later, Shell, Petronas, and few other companies have established good standards, which probably could be emulated. We could be able to benchmark, cut it across within the region, and you can see better adaptation of it. Of course, the ASEAN Future Workforce Council itself is one of the recommendations which has successfully come on board, because today we are advocating the need of the industry perspective, a corporate perspective, because we felt one of the biggest challenge in TVET is that when it's too supply driven, we may not be able to really utilize the skill that's required, right? And one of the biggest, I think all of us would agree, the branding of the skill education in the region has to be completely changed, and we got to leverage it because there's a general trend. I think we would agree, Samir, that those who opted for the skill education are those normally are not so successful in pursuing the traditional certifications via the university and academic pathway. And this generally created an impression that it is not a priority area. But in reality, skilled graduates are those who get employment almost immediately compared to the university, conventional areas of studies. All right. So the reputation and the branding of the skill education has to be revamped and then relooked at in order for us to move forward. And I think I'll stop at this juncture on some of the recommendations. Probably we could take on and see the perspective of from. But what I'm trying to bring forward here is that the evaluation of skill, it is not an issue of the policymaker alone. I think we have to come to a stage where the industry, the corporate, has to take a more proactive approach, and the policymakers has to accept the reality. It has to be shaped as a demand driven, and in order for us to move forward and ensure that the right perspective is seen in the development of the skill based employment moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato. There was a lot of interesting insights there. So I'm going to come back to you later on during the Q&A, but a couple of things that sort of stood out from listening to you. Of course, the first thing is that the skills that will be demanded, not just in 30 years, but in 10 years. Some of those skills, are we supplying them in our TVET institutions, in our higher education institutions? That's something is really really important to keep in mind. Sort of the demand for labor, the type of jobs that will emerge, the new types of work, and are we getting ready for them? So, right, so that's the first point that I think you raised. That was very very good, and we'll get into it. The other is sort of the what is the role of TVET given the skills mismatch between supply and demand? Are we more supply focused? How can we be more demand focused? How can we link with industry? And this is a perennial problem that we see in the TVET sector. And this is something that I'll get into it as well. And the other one that you mentioned on sort of encouraging ASEAN member states to have a TVET council, including private sector. This is something that actually I've been involved in a couple of work that we are doing in Indonesia and in the Philippines, precisely on these aspects. So I'll get back to you on this as well. But one thing I will before I go to Janine, just to give you a bit more time to think about it. What do you see the role of publicly provided training going forward, or even TVET in general? You mentioned this regulation, the issue of regulation. And one thing I've noticed, especially in Indonesia, there's Ministry of Manpower and Ministry of Education. It's different sets of regulations, right, for the same type of qualification. How do we arrive at a situation where even our supply is sort of, technically we don't create a mismatch when somebody goes with a qualification? Can I know for sure I'm hiring the right plumber when the certificate says he's a plumber, right? So this is something that I want you to think about a bit more, and we'll get into it during the Q&A. Now let me go to Janine. Janine has been doing a lot of interesting work leveraging technology in sort of skills development. So we'll hear a bit more about that. Over to you, Janine. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. So, and thank you so much, Datuk, for sharing your thoughts. I also found your insights so interesting. And the question that I asked myself is, supply-driven versus demand-driven, how can we actually switch from a supply-driven system to a demand-driven system, right? Now, my work is a little bit more downstream from what you've described. Just to give you a little bit of context, so self-education's the main problem that we are trying to solve is the 260 million children and youth who do not go to school today, and the many more that go to school that are not learning. Right, and for this demographic, they're not able to go to school no matter how many schools we build or how many teachers we train. So the question that we asked ourselves was, how do we bring the schools to them? And I hear from the previous panelists that mobile phones start to become more popular, right? And it's so true that even for our audience, many of them, their only technology that they have, they are in touch with are their phones. And it's really exciting that low-end phones are really penetrating the bottom of the pyramid, the masses, right? Now, we also are realistic that mobile phones are only solving one part of the problem, which is access, but there's a bigger part of the problem, which is effectiveness, like what Datuk was mentioning, right? And today's education may not be relevant, engaging, or effective. And, Brunei has a high youth unemployment rate, and where I work the most in Indonesia also has a very high youth unemployment rate. Despite college graduates increasing, right, youth unemployment rates still remain high. So for this demographic, right, if they can't find a job, that will not change a single thing for them. So when we first started in our journey, the question that we asked ourselves is, what should we teach? And because it's really hard to forecast, right? In 5 to 10 years' time, what jobs will be available or what skills will be relevant. And I'm talking from the perspective of somebody who works in skills and the workforce of the future space, as well as a tech entrepreneur. Let me give you an example, right? 5 years ago, a lot of the companies are still doing quality assurance QA, right? Testing out the technology products by with human testers, right? So with the human testers will click through the website or click on apps and see whether those work or not. Now that has already, in a short span of time, replaced by automated testing, where engineers are the ones who write the test. So there's no more real need for manual testers. And in 2 years, I already saw new products coming out that replace the engineers who wrote the test automation. And that is the off-the-shelf testing tools. So the skills really move so quickly, and hence, and because we are at the forefront of the tech sector, right? We see that right in front of our eyes, and myself being a software engineer. So when we asked ourselves what skills is most relevant, we got to the conclusion that the ability to learn how to learn is so much more important than before. But what does that mean? So in our mind, we dissect that into two main buckets. One is the hard skills and one are soft skills, right? The hard skills being literacy and numerical skills. So you need to be able to read, but not only read, but fully comprehend what you read. At the same time, also being able to think and analyze, right? And that will help you to be able to learn anything you want. However, that's not enough, right? Because learning at the end of the day is hard, right? And with all these new skills and fields of work coming in, right? Or new skills that are in demand, we also need the soft skills like curiosity, even grit, right? To not give up. And it can be disheartening because I'm learning something, but suddenly something new comes along, and what I've learned is no longer relevant. So how do we also design an education system where we also train the soft skill side? And in our view, we need to train our learners into independent, lifelong learners, where they are able to, whenever there's a new skill, they don't wait for the government to, I need to wait for training to happen. If not, I won't learn, because a lot of things are available on Google, right? And I will just maybe leave you with two stories. One, I bumped into this, taxi driver in Indonesia, right? And he spoke English with an American accent. And I was so surprised how he managed to do so. And, he told me what? He said, I went to the school of Google. So, if there's anything that I don't know, I'll search, right? And he's quite right. A lot of things we can actually learn through Google, but why are a lot of, people are just sitting and waiting to be trained, right? A more proactive mindset, in our opinion, would really help with moving the youth and making them relevant for the workforce of the future. And a second story is something very recent that happened to us. So Soft Education has gone into a partnership with TikTok, and it is a whole new world. And even myself, I need to learn because I have no idea that actually creating short, entertaining videos are so difficult. So even myself, who's a software engineer, I know all the different coding things, but there's still a lot of things to learn and new things to explore. So I guess I'll leave myself to that. Thank you, Samir.
Thank you, Janine, for sharing the stories and also telling us more about your work. I think what you hit upon there by talking about teaching um, kids in primary, secondary school, and all the way from higher ed, students in higher ed and TVET, the ability to sort of how to learn, how do you learn new things. It's not always easy. I think you just made me feel bad for not figuring out how to learn Python, because that's the new programming language, right? So, and even economists have moved on to using Python and R, but I'm still using Stata and the old school for my analysis. But anyway, so that's something else. But we'll get into it in a second. Let's hear from Suzanne, more from the private sector, how a big industry player is sort of keeping track with the changing demand for labor within the industry, and how the efforts at skilling and reskilling from your perspective. Suzanne, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Samir, and good afternoon to everyone in the virtual room. I'm Suzanne Coogan. I'm Shell's Vice President of Brunei, LNG, and BGC. So it's been abundantly clear through all the conversations that we've heard today, and as shared by all our speakers and panelists, that in many ways the nature of work across ASEAN has fundamentally shifted and will continue to change as digital and digitalization occurs, and again, even more so in the face of COVID-19. Without deep thought and very considered action, though, some of the key measures by which we will measure success of this transformation may actually not materialize. Really, we need to think about how we can mitigate the unemployment impacts from what we've heard today, referred to as the fourth industrial revolution, to give people the skills that really can uplift them as workers if they're unskilled, and give them some formal training, whilst also in parallel continuously educating and upskilling those already in digital roles. We know and appreciate that digital technologies are really transforming our lives in ways that were not in any way imaginable even a decade ago. Companies are now striving to be almost wholly digital. And for those who are successful in this space, then they move into the concept of digitalization. And it starts with having the basics, just a simple, secure internet system, and then moving up into very advanced IT infrastructure. And we've heard the mention of automation and robotics and artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cloud computing, and many other concepts that are out there and being embedded within many different industries. Within the company I work for now, and within the industry that I'm working in, there are many pioneering developments and deployments of digital technologies that have taken place over many decades. There's a huge number of examples where digitization has allowed us to operate more safely, create ways in which more laborious jobs can be automated, and use data in a way that allows people to spend their time on far more fulfilling jobs and meaningful roles that allows them to maximize the individual impact that they can have, and also some, the satisfaction they get from the jobs they're doing. But let me give you just a couple examples from the industry I'm in right now. So essentially, digital technologies are now contributing to our societal license to operate, and essentially helping us improve the safety and transparency of all our operations. We can use robots in places that are potentially hazardous rather than sending people to go into them. We now have the ability to analyze 10 million data points every minute on equipment such as pumps and furnaces, and just making sure that we're able to maximize their performance, which gives us more stable operations and also gives us greater energy efficiency. We can now use artificial intelligence and machine learning to reduce downtime in equipment, and this can lead to lost production and maintenance costs if we're not completely on top of it. Today, we can even use drones to make fully immersive digital twins of our assets. And one of the best examples we have is actually here in Singapore in our Buchan plant. And these are technological advances that were just unattainable a few years ago, based on the access, training, and ability to really be able to access that level of data. So when we think about digitization, and what I've just spoken about there is all about technology and data, but really the concepts that we've heard today and that we've heard people speaking about, it's about people, their behaviors, their training, and their agile ways of working. We need a blend of people who can not only develop digital solutions, but who can also understand what the business impact of those solutions actually mean, and how we can really bring the digitization into a space where it can be value adding and also in a sustainable way. But in truth, and as we've as Dato Palani there shared, we are starting from very different points with a diverse range of skills in different areas across the region that are not equal. Essentially, education and development policies continue to play a key role, which we've just heard about there. But in industry, we also have a shared responsibility to help equip today and futures generations with the skills they need to be able to develop. It is not something that we just look back and expect educators and governments and policy to deliver. It's something that we should be working in partnership with those individuals and those government departments to be able to deliver. Many countries in which we operate today as Shell want to improve their access to technical and digital education and to be able to see greater opportunities for skills development. We have a couple of programs that are global that we use to be able to meet this objective. Two of them, one is the Science, Technology, Engineering and Maths Education Program, and the other one is the Community Skills and Enterprise Development Program that we have. The STEM program is designed to help directly address some of the challenges we've been talking about with regards to digitization. And we have a flagship program called N Explorers, which runs in 20 different countries, or almost 20 different countries now. And closer to home in Brunei, we have the Shell Livewire Brunei initiative, which is now a global program that focuses on entrepreneurship. And today, a lot of those programs that have been looked at and a lot of the content of that is really focused around digital and technology. And this is done very, very in close partnership with the Education Ministry. And as I said, it's a great example in Brunei of how this has been done successfully. I will add that the Community Skills and Development Enterprise Program does link directly the skills that are being offered and provided and the training that's being given is directly linked in a lot of cases to employment opportunities. So we try to understand the needs and skills gaps in the communities in which we're working and provide the training there that directly links to employment. And as we just heard just a moment ago as well, that is fundamentally allows people to move on in their education, but also move on in their livelihoods and up the ladder in terms of what they're able to do. So, and just to give a quick example, in Shell, I think we spent about $100 million on the collective group of these programs across the world since I think it was just in 2019, $100 million. So we do put a lot of effort and we do put a lot of funding behind these particular initiatives. There is one thing that I would like to just conclude with, though, and that's around our own individual responsibility. I think we've heard very clearly from just there that, you know, we have government policy, we have the education system and the ministries that really are taking a leadership role here, working in parallel, hopefully in partnership with industry. But it's also us as individuals that bring, as Janine said just there, that grit and curiosity to learn. And I have to say that I am the generation of hotmail.com and I am a geophysicist by training. And I started my career 15 years ago. And I have no choice but to continue to learn and to continue to learn digital skills or choose to be outdated. Now, I am very privileged that I work in a company that allows and facilitates and encourages graduate and mid and later career skills training and development. And for that, I do feel exceptionally privileged. But I do fundamentally believe that we have to acknowledge that fear and that uncomfortable situation that we all may face mid-career when we have to make a choice on whether or not we do actually go learn Python or we choose to learn something different that keeps us relevant today. So I believe that by combining all of these different areas, the government, the educational industries, but education, also industry, and our own individual passion, we will be able to get to a point where we continue to develop these skills, continue to upskill ourselves and the workforce so that we and the industries we work in remain digitally relevant and overall, hopefully contribute positively to society.
Thank you, Suzanne. That was excellent. So now I think by the end of this panel, I'm going to have to start using School of Google to learn Python. But you know, I want to get to one point that all of you kind of alluded to, which was, you know, the quality of training, a TVET, and Dato mentioned the perception that people have about TVET as well. I'll start with that first, and then there are several questions that have come on from the audience as well. The first is, Dato, maybe I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Janine and Suzanne. yes, we all know that the perception when it comes to TVET is not always the best, and there's a good reason for that, right? Maybe it's the quality of training, maybe it's the types of standards that are set to sort of evaluate, to certify the training programs and the graduates who go through these programs. So we need to sort of understand where is the fault. Where does the fault line lie for this particular problem of perception, right? When I look at, now I'm sitting in Geneva talking to you, and, here, a lot of the folks who work in sort of you want to call it manual, but it's not necessarily low pay. It's actually highly productive, highly mechanized, automated jobs, which go directly from high school to they go into TVET, and then they enter into these relatively well-paid employment opportunities. But here, what is different, and that I see compared to countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Cambodia, is that the foundation is strong, right? The primary, secondary school is very strong. So learning outcomes are strong at early level, so they don't accumulate over time. But when we come to, when we go to places like Indonesia, and then we talk about TVET, maybe it's too late. Maybe it's too late to talk about TVET or improve TVET even. Maybe it will not have an impact that we like to have, right? And that goes to what Janine was saying in terms of if learning outcomes, if kids are in school, yes, great, but are they learning? And if they're not learning, how can we change that, right? So I think it's all connected in a way. So first, I'll start with you, Dato, over to you, just for a minute or two, if you can reflect on this.
All right, okay. I think if you ask me the importance of skill education, where would be the right age or right stage for this to be embarked? I would say at even at the kindergarten stage. At that level, because you see the capacity and the ability of individual varies, and not everybody is tuned to a certain way of learning, and they have that kind of ability. But the system is being created, I think, in a such a way that everybody has to go through that common pathway before they eventually come to a specific direction. And like what you said, by the time when they come over there, it's probably a bit too late to start it off, and some of them struggle as they move. I think one of the key factor that we need to change would be the changing the mindset of the parents. I think the way they look at that, I think it starts from home. It starts from where how they look at the potential and the opportunity of this. And I think this way of thinking, if we can look at it, because the traditional thinking of area of skill, it's like being connoted with a low level of technology, probably with low level of salary, and this actually contributed to build this kind of perception. But I think when we are able to showcase that the opportunity, the employable opportunity, the career development opportunity, and how they could progress a much more structured long term in terms of skill pathway, I think the perception would eventually change. In fact, like Samira, during the part of delegation, I think Maria is also here. She was part of a delegate. She's in the audience. We went to Stuttgart, GIZ facilitator. We went to Stuttgart. We did some study visit. So we went to the Mercedes-Benz training factory to make a factory tour. So we were break into a few groups. So I end up to the last group, Samir. So they said, we'll put you together with another delegates that is joining the session. So I waited, and finally my delegate partners came in, the other visitors, and they're all 5 and 6 year old kindergarten student. So here I am holding my bag, going there, and I've got about 5, 6 year old girls joining and then looking at it. See, but the way I look at it, when you're able to portray the positivity of that opportunity, that kind of a perception of growth from that pathway, and when the education system allow for you to explore both of option, both pillars, and for you to decide what that could be suitable, I tell you that kind of change in policy could be a real game changer. And I think if we are able to advocate that part of the importance, then I think the acquisition of skill will not be a kind of an alternate arrangement, but it will go into a mainstream arrangement. And that will work, because you see, when we embark on fourth industrial revolution, it is not only about programming and all that. There are other areas which is equally important, and these could be the area that is very value added. And when it's embarked, I tell you, the region, the from various perspectives, it doesn't matter from whether your local institution has that capacity or not. What actually would matter is that using the digital pathway opportunities, you'll be able to leverage and upskill yourself with a fundamental skill. And that actually could really take them forward and could change the life, in fact. All right. So, and that could bring a continuously a complete new perspective of opportunity, and that would enhance the driving the community towards the embarking on this. Because the way I look at it, acquisition of skill is also one of the effective way in eradication of poverty. Because once they have got a skill that they'll be able to not only to work as an employee, but also to explore opportunity as a gig worker, as a to explore opportunity as an entrepreneur, and this could actually really change lives. So I think like what Suzanne and Janine mentioned, I think it is about going down to the basic, but I think people still couldn't see it because we have been cultured, we have been conditioned in a way of thinking that the administrative or managerial pathway is the so-called the pathway comparatively, like compared to the huge opportunities that exist in the skill pathway compared to the managerial pathway, right? So this could be one of the real things to look at. And I think I just want to put in one point. I think I saw a comment one of the participants just now on the technology. You see, one of the best way to move forward for the institution or educators in this area is to collaborate with industry, because there's no way for the institution to innovate or invest or understand the changes, the rapid changes in the industry, but the business will be able to access it. They'll be able to judge, evaluate, because that is their survival. When institutions are able to integrate in that context, so you may suddenly move into a space of high-end technology, despite you may not have the physical assets, but you do have the software part of it. So this could be a real game changer kind of thing. And then when we embark on this kind of thing, I think we need more people like Susan to support the initiative that is done by Janine and us on advocating the importance of that. When they could see the association of a big employers, big brands in the enhancement of the skill education, that probably also be one way to change the perception. Samir.
Thank you, Dato. One issue I'm going to pick up on, which is sort of you got into, of course, the perception of TVET and training in general. So the gap between demand for skills and supply of skills has always been there. It's not because of fourth industrial revolution, or it's not anything new per se. But what is happening now because of 4IR, one could argue, is that the gap is maybe widening at a faster pace than before. And I think here, of course, school systems, training systems, it takes a long time to update them, to reform them, right? And this is where people like Janine play a key role, right? So Janine has the mobile, using mobile technology to provide skills that is needed, for example, to the Gojek drivers in Indonesia to teach them English, right? So that's where you can't do that in a school system in the right sort of the real time, to meet the real time demand, right? But you could do that with an initiative like that when you involve a private sector or an edtech startup, right? So Janine, over to you on this. How do you bridge the gap between demand and supply of skills?
Thank you so much, Samir. And Dr. I really couldn't agree more about education, the sector, working very closely with the industry. And many times, because these two industries are working in silos, so educators in education sector, we teach what we want to teach or what we plan to teach already. But the industry is moving a different way, right? Like you said, they need to survive and they need to pivot and they need to find new ways to solve problems. So definitely, I'm very, very much pro a tighter collaboration with the education sector and in the industry. And that's definitely the approach that we are taking. And I just, would like to address one of the questions, interesting questions here, right? How do we, provide and also improve educators in ASEAN, especially if they lack the industry exposure and experiences? And I also would like to tie that together with a lot of comments about, being proactive in learning, right? So I reflect on an Asian centralized training session that we did yesterday. So part of our work is to enable educators with digital skills. And because we found that as we roll out in different places, many educators actually do not have the exposure to technology or sufficient exposure to different digital tools. And what was interesting is that, I've seen in front of me when educators are, for the lack of a better word, screaming at the students over Zoom, don't read forward, don't click this and stuff, things like that. Well, for us, it's more of why don't we let the students click? Why don't we let the students be proactive? So the educator's mindset is not only just the digital skills, but also how to act as a facilitator of the students, so that the students are not being reprimanded or scolded because they're taking proactive ways to explore new content and or ask questions that are not within the curriculum itself, right? So I would say in terms of improving educators, it's not only just the technical skills, but also how do we encourage educators to allow our students to be proactive and not reactive learners, right? So that's something really interesting that came out of the training, where we have, and that's a common seems to be a common thread over. We had trainers from Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, etc. yesterday. So that was a very interesting discussion. And I also reflect back on one of our experience, recently, actually from Malaysia, this little school called SMK Jenjarum. And SMK Jenjarum actually is in the middle of the palm oil plantation. So most of the parents are farmers or plantation workers. And what was interesting about this school, and interesting about how the educators, teachers in this school think that's really different from other schools that we've seen, is that they work really closely with the industry. So they work really closely with us, and through us with other companies like Lenovo, like Microsoft, and they have even a very STEM-focused lab within the plantation school for their students to learn and to be hands-on. And I've even seen apps that the students create that is based out of what they, creating apps, solving their own problem about perhaps, deciding what to wear this morning, and other, problems that they face themselves, which I thought is really a very interesting way of teaching. And such schools, I think, would be really good to be role models, and for other schools around the region, and it has been. So I thought that's very interesting. And circling back to, reflecting and how do we support educators. So I do think that, the industry, as well as the Ministry of Education, need to play an active role in terms of reskilling and training of our teachers, rather than giving them so much more pressure in training, and it's much more pressure in changing them. But how do we really support them and give them the help that they need, right? And hear that feedback. So I think that's a very important part, and definitely for ministries of education to provide that support to educators as well as students. But on top of everything, like what Datuk says, to work very closely with the industry, because the last thing you want is to train a bunch of people who are trained for jobs that don't exist. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And so I'm glad that you discussed the point about the trainers and the teachers. And that was a question that was raised because one of the things that happened because of school closures due to COVID-19, when learning moved online, everybody assumed, yeah, you had the computer in front of you or mobile, whatever technology you were using or device or connectivity, but there was not much thought put to the teachers. Are they able to actually continue online? Can they teach online? Do we have the capacity? Do they have the capacity, right? None of those things. Of course, work, we went from one day to another quickly working from home, for those of us that were lucky enough to do that. And then we assume teachers could do the same thing. But actually, that's not the case for a lot of our countries and a vast majority of our students, right? So this is why we've been facing the digital divide, and not just in terms of access to technology, but
Absolutely.
also in terms of learning and all of that, right? But I think, now I want to pivot to Suzanne, because the two examples that Suzanne gave, the STEM program and the community and skills development, I want to learn a bit more about them, because of course, Shell, yeah, you have solved the problem in a way, because you're doing your own, running your own programs in a way of solve two sets of problems. One is that maybe when the foundation is weak, maybe you can build on that, somehow provide them that little bit of lift before they enter into their jobs, once they enter Shell. And the other one is to provide opportunities to continue reskilling and upskilling. Suzanne, can you talk a bit more about this? Because you can see from a company's perspective is very different than an overall aggregate perspective on the gap between skills demanded and supplied. Over to you.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think just reinforcing what's been said there, we do view it in three different ways. So there is the education piece, which is really around STEM and making sure that equal opportunity, science, technology, and engineering, people have the opportunity to be educated in that space. And with regards to a STEM program, we also provide mentors and we run competitions and we provide kind of incentives for people to really get involved in this area of education, but also focusing, and as Janine said, on teachers. And there are some countries in the world where we actually physically support teachers as well in their training and their development. So we look at where we are operating and where there is a need to provide some support in that space. So that's in the kind of, the very bottom level, the youngest children that are people that we'd be working with or want to consider education with. But then you think too, as children or as teenagers come out of high school and they start to go through university, we also focus on how we have connections there. So we do have connections with a lot of universities where we provide either direct funding for specific courses where we see skills gaps, or we provide mentors, we provide awards and things like that to give people an opportunity to shine and to be recognized and pull through. We also provide, and I think it's very important, is internships. So there were a lot of internships that go across the breadth of a lot of different technical and non-technical disciplines where people will come in during their degrees or during their training programs and spend some time with Shell, understand and learn being in the company, what it's like. And I mean, the jump up, I was one of these people, I did it myself. I came in as an intern, and the jump that you get in just in terms of your own personal development and skills development is incredible over a very short period of time. And then if people choose to come and work for Shell directly from a degree-based program, there's also a very staged approach to developing that individual when they come in. I can honestly say that when I came in with my degree, I was not equipped to do my job as a geophysicist straight away. I did a internship first, and I came in and I did a graduate program essentially for 2 years. And then once that graduate program is finished, you still have what's called new technical professional development. You still continue to learn over a very long period of time. And it's the acceptance of that when I finished my education, I hadn't finished learning. I continued to learn through, and I have to continue to learn throughout my career. Then there's a parallel group of people who didn't go through the formal university systems or maybe even didn't have the opportunity to finish high school. And then it's how do we support those individuals where it makes sense for us to be able to do so. And of course, we would love to be able to support in many different areas and industries, but we focus our support in the communities in which we work and on the skills gaps that we see. And we directly set up programs for people that can come and train to be a specific skill where we have a gap and then link that directly to employment. And I think that the idea of developing skills, as both Dato and Janine have shared, that you build the skills, you want those skills to be able to put to good use. And then when you have that ability to link the skills training to a job and employment, then the buy-in and take up from the individual, but also from either the regulator or the Department of Energy or whoever you're working with in that particular situation is obviously much higher. So doing it in partnership is quite important. And then just one thing that runs across everything, which I think is fundamental, is that we as people who have come through this kind of training and have been fortunate enough to have this kind of development then need to be able to look and give back as well. So with mentoring, with choosing to sit on advisory boards for universities, etc., or for schools, and making sure that we're feeding the most relevant information back into the system so that they can keep their programs up to date. Janine, I loved what you said with regards to innovation and curiosity. I think that's incredibly important to instill in children early so that they develop that ability to critically think and analyze, and that starts early, and that starts with how we fundamentally build the education system around them. So I think it's multifaceted. There are many different areas that we need to focus on. Of course, we put a lot of attention on the STEM part because we're an energy company and that's where we need to focus. But at the same time, we put a lot of attention as well on helping others develop digital and technical capabilities through all the different programs we have.
Thank you, Suzanne, for that. Now, I think we are, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask Dato and Janine to maybe provide your thoughts. You have seen some of the questions that have come through and what Suzanne also said. Of course, looking at this problem of skills, the future of skills development, from a perspective of a large firm that can afford to spend 100 million in 1 year alone for a skills development effort is very different than when we're looking at, the role of TESDA in the Philippines, for example, or the role of Ministry of Manpower and the BLKs and the SMKs in Indonesia. We have those face their own set of challenges in terms of raising the standards of training. And not just TVET, right? We're also talking about higher education as well. That is also critical. How do we prepare our higher education graduates for the type of employment opportunities? There was one question that was raised about what are the top 3 skills you think will be important. Maybe I will give you an opportunity also to provide your thoughts on what those 3 skills are. And one skill that I will throw out to the audience is writing, ability to write. I'm amazed and surprised how that simple yet critical skill is important all throughout one's career. But anyway, over to you, Janine, and then to Dato to end. Thank you.
So I feel like my response will be a little bit like wishing for more wishes. See, the ability to learn and growth mindset means that you can learn a lot of things, including writing. So that will be the skill that I think will be the most important. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. That's a great answer. Dato, over to you.
All right. I think what I would like, I think the importance, I think the evolution of the importance of education, skill-based education has actually come to a matured stage. If we are no more at the stage we are thinking about the importance of it, we are now talking about accelerating. And there is a great sense of responsibility and inclusiveness among the industry to assist the stakeholders, be it the government or the institution, in embarking this challenge. So I think there's a lot of, educators here in the audience and probably policymakers. I think the right way forward is, I think rather than institutions trying to embark and catch up the change of technology, the best way forward is to synergize, establish fruitful collaboration so that we'll be able to explore the potential and the growth in a very hands-on and real-time manner in pursuing this. I think the key word is to synergize, to collaborate in pursuing this agenda as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato. That's a great conclusion to our discussion today. I think now I'm going to invite Mark to give concluding remarks before he hands it over to our MC. Thank you, Mark.
Listen, Samir, thank you very much indeed. This has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. I think there are a couple of things that I've taken away from this, not just as a politician and as a trade envoy to Brunei Darussalam, but as a father of 3 teenage kids. And that is a point that Janine made, which is that the technology is moving fast and skills move really fast. And that was backed up by Suzanne, who talked about the fact that life is not about staying still, it's about learning the whole time. And I think people of my generation, I'm in my late 50s, owe it, again, following on from Suzanne's point, to be help in terms of mentoring and help passing on those skills. And it's really, really important that, the young have a huge amount of energy to learn new skills, but the old have dare I say, a little bit of wisdom, which comes through life experiences. But look, I think there are really 4 important points that I wanted to make. And I think the first is that all of this about changing technology is absolutely vitally important, but so is sustainability. And I think that we need to make sure that when we're doing all this training, we embed into that the whole idea of sustainability, and Hired supports the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that's something we need to really, really think sort of intrinsically in everything we do in that. The second is the UK support for the seed funding and sharing technical aid and vocational skills when it comes to the ASEAN-backed Hired program. Seed funding is, is to help get things off the ground, and we really are very, very committed to that. And I think the third point is the pilot apprenticeship program. It's very interesting in the UK. About 20 years ago, we had a massive swing in the UK. 20, 30 years ago, we had a massive swing in the UK to having more people going to university, and the aim was to get half the population to go through university, half the school leavers that get a university education. Now we recognise that actually apprenticeships are really, really important. Learning those skills on the job is incredibly important, and so supporting that that apprenticeship program, I think, is absolutely vital. And I think the fourth point is really just to make reinforce that commitment the UK has to ASEAN. For me, it's a very, very big deal. I was an investment banker back in my 20s and 30s, and my specialization was Asia. And so we were taking British and European money and investing it into new businesses in Asia. I kind of first went into China back when I was 23 in 1986, and and I've watched Asia develop over the years. The fact that the UK is a dialogue partner of ASEAN, and one of the first in 25 years, is a really big deal for us. I mean, don't underestimate how important we think this is. We look from our part in the Western world across to Asia, and we see that this is where the engine of economic growth is going to come for the next 100 years potentially, and being a dialogue partner with ASEAN is so important to us. So we are absolutely committed to helping that ASEAN has the right skills to flourish. You want to be the world's 4th largest economy by 2030. I think the projections have it as the biggest economy by 2050. In order to achieve that and then make the most of it, you need the right skills. And we are absolutely 100% committed here in the UK to doing everything we can to help ASEAN achieve all of its ambitions. And hopefully you guys can take us along for the ride as well, which would be fantastic. So Samir, look, thank you very much indeed for all of you. And Samir, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. That's a great summary. So I'm glad that you gave the closing remarks. Those 4 points, I couldn't have summed it up better. Thank you, Mark. I think we're going to hand it over to our MC for the event. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Samir, and all of the panelists. I think I've just said that twice, just to be sure you heard me say thank you. So, Dr. Samir, with that, we bring your session now to just about our conclusion of our afternoon today. So ahead of our closing remarks, we'd like to have a short video from Mitsubishi, one of our gold sponsors.
Mitsubishi Corporation is an integrated business enterprise with offices and subsidiaries in 90 countries and approximately 1,700 group companies worldwide. Through our 10 business groups, we are engaged in a wide range of businesses across virtually every industry, ranging from natural resources to items used in everyday life. Our employees manage a variety of operations in locations across the globe, working to achieve sustainable growth both for the company and society.